from the fields there comes the breath of new mown hay.
Good evening and welcome to Hoosier Storytellers, a program for and about the people of Frankfort, Clinton County, and Central Indiana. I'm your host, Mike Clausen, Outreach Librarian here at the Frankfort Community Public Library. Thanks to all of you for joining us here tonight in the Scanta Theater at the library, as well as anyone who may be watching us live or in the future on YouTube Live. The program tonight will be 30 to 40 minutes long, so we can allow some time for questions from the audience and still wrap it up by 7 o'clock. The Red Barn Summer Theater was founded in Frankfort by Martin and Carol Ann Henderson in the summer of 1968. I think I saw them walk in. Marty, Carol Ann. In 1973, the theater moved to its present location in Joe and Irma Mash's cattle barn. Here to discuss the origins of the theater, the significance of the theater to the community, and the upcoming 56th season of the barn are two longtime company members and the artistic director of the Red Barn. Please welcome Michael Taylor, Jan McGill, and Tom Bewley. I should probably admit that once upon a time I was a Red Barn company member. I'm currently on the board of directors, and this summer Luke McLaughlin will be directing a play there that I wrote, so I'm not exactly an innocent bystander. If we... Thank you.
Never an innocent anything.
No.
Well, somebody had to say it.
Our first mistake was inviting any of these people, but particularly Tom Bewley. But if we start at the beginning, then we should start with a member of the original company, Jan McGill. A graduate of Frankfort High School and Indiana University, Jan retired from the Division of Family and Children, FSSA, after 31 years. So far, Jan has worked 43 seasons at the Red Barn. She is also a charter member of the Clinton County Civic Theater. Jan recently won an Encore Award for her performance in Over the River and Through the Woods at the Westfield Playhouse. A longtime audience favorite at the Red Barn, Jan was named a Clinton County Gem in 2017. Jan, who or what is Mrs. McThing?
Mrs. McThing was my senior class play. And it was, I played Edward Arthur Schellenbach.
Need to use the microphone. Jan insists, I don't need no stinking microphone.
I don't. However, okay, Mrs. McThing, is that better? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Was my senior class play, and I played Mrs. Schellenbach. She had one entrance, and she was excellent. She was. It's a perfect role.
How did that role in Mrs. McThing lead you into being a charter member of a summer theater company?
Actually, Martin Henderson did that. He, when the Red Barn first started, Marty and I discussed it, and I was a member of the first season. There you go, and 39 straight after that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me some of your memories of those early years before we were in a barn, and just the company and some memories you had of that time?
Okay, we had dropped the fire curtain. Everybody was on stage. We were able to work proscenium. We could work in the round. It was really very flexible. We had risers, and you know, one guy backed his chair up. Well, of course he fell off the riser. Of course he did. One of the things that I remember is people reaching forward from their seats, and like there were pillows on a buffet kind of thing. And they would reach forward and rearrange things from their seats, the audience. Yeah. So we had that kind of thing going on. Right at the very beginning, there was a horrible storm. And it was like, oh my God, what will that do to the set? But when we got to the high school, there were numerous vents with water just gushing down. And Martin's set, of course, was stunning, as they all were. And fortunately, nothing was touched on the set. Not good news for the auditorium at the high school, but all worked out. All worked out.
Who were some of your friends and cohorts that you worked with that you remember from those days?
Oh, gosh. Those were back in the days of, now not necessarily right at the beginning, but Jen Otterman, Barb Mondary, Terry Amy at the Red Barn itself, Alvia Lewis Fry. And we still meet once a month for lunch. We do, yes. Terry lives in California now, but.
And what's that group called?
Barn Squad. There was another name.
Yeah, that's right.
Any kids in here? Okay, we were called the Barn Bitches. And we wore it proudly. We even had a song and everything, so yeah, there you go.
I got to say, one of my early memories of seeing theater is still to this day one of my favorite shows, which was Barefoot in the Park with you and Frank Otterman, Kathy Bates, and Steve Miner. Mm-hmm. Those were some good actors there. In 1973, Martin Henderson, with a very large group of actors and volunteers, transformed a cattle barn into a theater. Jan, what do you remember about that transformation in those first early years at the barn?
Scraping manure off the walls of what would become our dressing room. We didn't have all of the buildings even that are at the barn now, but our dressing room was like from here to there, from being right actually on stage. So we had to be pretty quiet. All the costumes were hanging in there, and we got that all cleaned out and made it into a dressing room before the new dressing rooms were built.
What I remember about that time was that same summer, and you know what, I could be wrong, but I think this is right. That same summer that we converted the barn, we did 3 shows.
Yeah.
That's correct, right?
Was it 3 or 4?
Rhonda?
We had shows that year.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that was a lot of work.
I
And
know.
it
Here
was
here lies Jeremy Troy.
Yeah,
We opened with.
right. I remember that.
Yeah.
So over the years, can you think of a favorite role or a favorite production of yours that you were involved with at the barn?
Many, many, many.
Just one.
Okay. Well, I only did a couple. There were, I always remember them by who was in them, and I loved, even though I had a smaller role in Cabaret, I loved that show. I was house manager for it also, and we were doing a lot of running back and forth. I loved Little Me with Bewley. Go ahead, tell him. Tell him I don't care.
I don't know if anybody's seen
Mike.
that. I know Marty and Caroline.
There's a microphone in your lap.
I don't know if anybody's remember seeing that. I know Marty and Caroline did, but there was a scene where Jan comes out and she's supposed to be receiving a massage. And I put on some weird getup of a mustache and stuff. Totally stole focus, was chopping her butt and everything else. It got great laughs. Nobody heard a word that she said. And I think it pissed Jan off beyond belief. Because I definitely stole focus, which was a no-no back if you knew what you were doing, which I did not. So
They had built a sauna thing, and one night during the changeover, I went to crawl into the sauna thing, and one of the actors was lying in there. And I said, okay, then, you're going out too. And we did. And he was a little late for his next entrance, but I didn't put him there.
Thanks, Jan. Tom Bewley worked 10 summers at the Red Barn from 1977 until around 1987. Tom was Dean of Admissions at Idlewild, California Arts Foundation and was Director of Admissions at the Interlochen Center in Michigan. Tom lives in Bloomington, where he recently retired as Assistant Dean. This is the longest title of a job. Assistant Dean for Development at the Indiana University Luddy School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering. Thanks for driving up, Tom. Thank you. So how old were you when you started working at the Red Barn, and how did you come to do that?
Well, I remember I saw, I think, Mr. Roberts out on the onstage theater at the high school. And then, excuse me, I think I saw Cabaret maybe 9, 10 times, something like that. Mostly because of the Kit Kat girls. Plus, it was just a really great show. And I happened to grow up across the alley from Marty and Caroline, and I was in Boy Scouts with their sons. And Marty and Caroline took us down to Randsburg, down Bloomington, for Boy Scout camp that week, and I had just seen it for like the 8th time. And Marty was asking me, or Caroline was asking me what I thought about it. And they said, what did you think about the dancing gorilla? I thought, man, that gorilla just could not dance very well at all. And it just so happened the gorilla was Marty in a gorilla suit. I didn't find that out till years later, but and he didn't dance very well. I mean, he had high heels on in a gorilla suit, so you have to. And then I did some theater in high school, and then did my first year after I graduated high school in '77 in Harvey, which Marty played the lead in that, which is always interesting when Marty plays the lead in something. I should give Marty his due, though. I can't remember my address now, and when he was my age, he was remembering long monologues or coming close. So he made it look a lot easier than what it really is.
I was just curious, what, if any, influence do you think working at the barn sort of set you on your path in your life?
Well, geez. I mean, everything, you know. It taught me discipline. I made a reference years ago when I was talking about the barn. I said, Marty and Caroline were the Bobby Knights of theater. I mean, they taught me, you know, how to show up, how to show up 100% or close. Taught me being proud of something. Taught me everything about the arts. I mean, I was exposed, a small town like Frankfort, I didn't know Chekhov, I didn't know Ibsen, I didn't know Shakespeare, I didn't. And, you know, it opened the world to me. That's why I went to college. That's why I ended up going to Idlewild. That's why I ended up moving to California with you. It was, you know, it was the world to me. And I think Frankfort has to, and I think does, realize how lucky they are for a small town to have that kind of institution out there in the cornfields. But Yeah, no, it was a training ground beyond anything I could really vocalize.
Looking back on your time at the Red Barn, can you name a favorite production or role that you did?
Come on. You know what that is.
Does it involve me?
Yes, it does.
I didn't know that.
Of Mice and Men with Clausen. Yeah. Yeah, that was. And the funny thing is, I remember one summer I was coming back and Marty was walking his English sheepdog around the block, and he stopped in and he said, you know, we're not going to do it, because I've been pestering him to do it, and I said, we're not going to do it this year. And I was really disappointed. But I think it was a test in some ways to test my fortitude, you know, to have a good season, to do that again. And I think we did it the year after. And it was, Mike can always talk about this, but it was the first time that I kind of really lost Tom Bewley and became the character. And in some ways, it was kind of weird. I mean, it was a little emotional for me in some ways. But I'm sure many of you know of Mice and Men, but to have that in a barn, you know, when the set really is in a barn, a lot of it is. And just a beautiful piece of writing like that, for me, that was a big favorite, along with a lot of other stuff, but that certainly was at the top of my list.
Oh, thanks.
It wasn't so much you, but...
Yeah, thank you. This will be Michael Taylor's 8th season as artistic director of the Red Barn. Michael first worked at the barn as an actor in 1998, and except for a 5-year period away, has been there ever since. A published playwright and a filmmaker, he spends his winters as the director of theater at Frankfort High School. An actor, set designer, set builder, and director, you may recognize him as the guy directing traffic in the parking lot, Michael Taylor. Well, are you all ready to go for this season?
No way.
No.
No
Have
way.
you thought about it?
I have, because I have to, because I have you over my shoulder all the time. Are we ready? Are we ready? But it's an all-year thing, and I don't think people understand that it never ends. Marty had Carol Ann. I have Luke. I have Kiera. Now Ellen is joining the fold. We have Rochelle or Maddie Myers. I have this core group that helps me. And I don't know what kind of core group they had. I know Steven eventually, he came in full time as well. But to think that the two of them started it and they did everything, just the two of them really, that we're all kind of doing together is ridiculous. I mean, it's I don't know, it's absurd, but it is truly a love for the theater and making the place go.
One thing I didn't write down, but I wanted to ask you to talk about for a minute, since you were talking about it takes all year, is talk a little bit about what it takes just to maintain the barn for a summer season, but things that have to be done all year round.
Well, it's a real barn, and as we said, it was already there before we got there, and so maintaining that. But the secret is, and this is the hardest part, is adding new boards or new paint, enhancing things, but not losing the feel of the old barn. You want it to still have that same aura when you walk in, that people who worked at it, when it opened, they walk in, they say, I still remember that, or that still looks the same. And it's nice when they say it still looks the same and you know that you changed it. Because there's a lot of things that has been changed that does look different. One of them is the dressing room that she was scraping manure off of. But
I don't have that anymore.
but it's one of those things, as time changes, you have to enhance it. They talk about the good old days, and it's, back in our day, this was so great. And maybe, but I like to think of today as the good old days, because I don't have to work as hard as those people worked back in those days. The old dressing room was this table that you guys built with these little tiny mirrors. And now, with the help of Clausen and some others, we redid the dressing room. and it has a nice floor to it, and nice mirrors with lights, that are all there, and it's updated. And that's, I think, for the old Barneys, probably one of the hardest hits when they walk in and they see it, because there's so many memories for them. And I remember those two in my first few years, that how it used to look. And I remember the jokes and sitting across from the person there and, and trying to distract them while they're doing their makeup. And now you don't have that. Everyone has their own space. So that memory of it is gone. It's when you walk in, the memory that is left is what is within you and what you remember. And so now we're just starting our own memories. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but.
Yeah, and something that I would like all three of you, because I'm sure all three of you have something to say. I'd like to talk a little bit about Joe and Irma Mash, the original owners of the barn, and who really became company members of a sort. Anybody?
Well, I'm sure I do not know them like you guys. I mean, Joe, I'm from the first time I saw him, he was already in a wheelchair. Oh. When I met him, but he still had a ton of energy, and he would always, the two of them would always come preview night when I started, and always sit right up there at the ramp. And it was my first thing. As soon as that show ended, before Marty would give notes, and usually you were the one writing them down at that point, I would always run up to ask him how he thought. How, did I make him proud? And that night. Whether I did or not, he always said yes. So I'll take it. But it was such a satisfaction of knowing him and how proud he was of what we were still doing and that the place was still going. And to kind of jump away, because I know the newer, and Lynn Mash, his son, who is now running it and still comes out and sees the show each year. The look on his face that it's still happening, and when he looks around the yard, or he walks in the building and, he just says, I remember when that was done, or I helped with that, or, but his just amazement that it's still going, that people still have the love for it today that they did back then. So.
I remember I always think of Joe with monkey socks.
Yeah.
He wore these boots that came up at about right there, and he had a cane at that point, but he always had these monkey socks on, if you know what I'm talking about, that they made stuffed monkeys out of. And he would come and see every show. But the most I remember about Joe and Irma is when you drove down the lane and you turned left into the parking lot past the barn. They were every time sitting there on their porch waving at every company member that came in. And then they had a lot of good parties in their barn too, the closing night parties.
I think about Joe and Irma, who I think initially were somewhat reluctant to let a bunch of actors in their property. They weren't quite sure of us. There's a great quote some guy wrote about barns, and he said, if you leave grain in your barn, you'll get mice. If you have an empty barn, you'll get actors. And so Joe got actors, and I think he grew to love it and enjoy it, but I remember the monkey socks, because Joe would always come down to watch dress rehearsal. I think he was as excited by what went on behind the scenes as the show. And he smoked a pipe, and he had the socks, and he would put the socks up on the chair and have his pipe and just kind of sit back there like that. Yeah. But I really think he enjoyed it.
And he was on stage, wasn't he, boss, a couple times? Or?
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. He was in Barefoot in the Park.
Oh.
I don't think he had any lines,
walk-on.
did he?
But, yeah.
I also remember the Mashes for one other reason. They would always have a martini before they had dinner in the evening. And they would open invitation, anybody who wanted to come over. Well, it was generally bad timing for us because we had maybe an hour between rehearsal and shows or something. So we didn't do it a whole lot. But they would have one, and they had these tiny little glasses, these tiny little martini glasses that were no bigger than that. And they would hand that glass to you and you'd have a martini with them. But I always remembered that too. They loved to have actors over to sit with them.
That was my first martini with them. And with you, it was during the winter. And I tried to
Okay,
drink.
well, let's not get into too many.
And I tried to drink it and I couldn't. And I asked them to put some grape juice in it. And I remember that just offended them beyond belief.
I remember Joe bringing down our first roll of toilet paper because we had a portalette at that point, and he brought a roll of toilet paper for us.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
There you go.
Michael, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, you mentioned some of the people that you work closely with at the barn, but could you talk a little bit about the company this year? Returning veterans, people who have been there a while, any new performers that might be joining the company?
We do. We have several new faces that'll be out this year. From the list of the ones that I already said, Aaron Moon, also a staple at the barn. He'll also be out. And I know he's very excited. We talked about different roles and things that he would play. And there was definitely a couple that he was really fighting for. And I didn't have the heart to tell him no, so that's what he's playing. But we have people coming from all over, from Florida. We have them from Nebraska, from New Jersey, Tennessee. So they're really coming from all over. This was our largest year of auditions since I've been doing it. Now, I know Marty and Steven would fly up to Chicago or drive up to Chicago and do the IRTAs and the ITAs and all of that. Especially since COVID, so much has changed. You do a lot of your auditions now online. So they put it out there. There's a Facebook page, apparently, with Summer Stock Theaters, and they look at it. They look at the reviews to see what people said about it. And if it's positive, then they send you things. So apparently we're getting enough positive because I had so many videos. I couldn't keep up with all of them. And I'm somebody that, as an actor myself, I want a fair shot. And I want to give every actor who sends an audition a fair shot. So I want to listen to every song that they send me. I want to listen to every word of their monologue. And sometimes you can tell within the first 10 seconds that you're probably going to say no. But then every now and then you get past that 10 seconds and you say, man, I'm glad I waited because this person's great. And I hope that somebody did that for me. Yeah, so it's really changed. You don't have that personal thing. I remember when I first auditioned, I was in Marty's basement where he had built a bar, and he just said, "We're going to do it here." And he leaned back. He said, "Carol Ann's upstairs. She's doing dishes right now. She doesn't care. She hears this all the time. So if you're bad, she won't even care." And so I thought, oh, okay. And I remember I did my monologue. It was from Boys Next Door. I sang from Newsies, King of New York. And I wasn't really a great singer. So I remember telling him when he asked me if I had a song, I said, yeah, but I'm not a great singer. And he said, okay, that's fine. And so I did the whole thing through. And he said, I just have one note for you. You're at an audition. Don't tell them you're bad. And that has stuck with me. I'm like, why did I tell him I'm bad? And because he's right, and I shouldn't have. And I was in the ensemble of the musical after that. But I'll never forget that. That moment that was my first professional audition, and I made it. And I got into the company that summer, and I don't know. I mean, there's too many stories to share, but. Of that, but I'll never forget that audition and that day of walking down there, and I just thought, wow, this place is awesome. And by this point, he's already sitting down ready for me to do my thing, and I thought, oh, it's go time. So Marty was, you could have so much fun with him, but when it was time to work, it was time to work.
It's been a long-standing tradition at the Red Barn that actors don't just act, but they build, paint, park cars, clean bathrooms. It's always been that way. I just wonder, is that sometimes a surprise to new actors coming into the company?
Absolutely, and I blame the colleges and the universities for it. When I graduated from Ball State, on my way to graduating, one of my professors told me I had to make a choice. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you got to know, who are you? What are you going to be when you graduate? Are you a director? Are you a designer? Because I took all the classes. He said, are you an actor? Are you a producer? I said, I'm all those things. He goes, you can't be. You got to make a decision. And I said, well, I refuse to. And the day I graduated, he came up and he hugged me and shook my hand and he said, Michael, you were right and I was wrong. He said, you're going to leave this place and you're going to find a job. He goes, you're going to find a job on day one because you're marketable, because you know a little bit of everything. And he said, this guy who is an actor they may be, if they get lucky, they might get a job right away, but they're probably going to have to work their way up the ranks. He said, you're going to walk right in and you're going to get a job, whether it's a technician or whatever. And that's exactly what's happened for me. When I moved out to LA, the first thing I did was, as soon as they found out I knew how to run a light board, they said, you're in. And then next thing I know, the next show, they said, oh, you're an actor? And then I'm on stage. So the universities are screwing up, I think. And it's getting harder and harder to find what we call a Barney, because they do everything. And when you tell them that, and you have this, after I watch their audition and I call them and I say, we do everything. We mow the lawn. If there's a board that's rotted, we tear that board off and we replace it. And some of them kind of giggle on the other side. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And we've even had some that say, yes, I'm all in, I want to do it. And then they get there and you have your opening meeting and then you go on to the first day and you're like, okay, you guys are in rehearsal and you're coming with me and we're pulling weeds. And they're like, oh, you meant that? Like, yeah. And some people grasp onto it because there's an ownership to the barn. Each company, that season belongs to that company. Because it's that we're building those shows. Whatever work is done at the barn that year, it's on them. And by the end of it, we really feel like a family. It's not like it was when you guys were doing it, like you literally built the barn. So it's a lot long. When you guys walked in on day one, you said, this is what we're doing. We own this place. And it takes today's actors almost to the end of the season before they truly appreciate what they've learned and what they've been through in the end. And you know whether or not they want to come back or not because they hug you and they say thank you. And then there's the others like, well, see ya. And most of those I'm saying, see ya.
Yeah. Before we open it up to questions from the audience for a little bit here, how about you tell us a little bit about your upcoming season and the 3 shows, particularly the first one.
There's been about 1,000 versions of the first one. That got to the point I just said, Michael, I'm not reading it again until you decide what you want. But that's him. And he's a perfectionist, which is why I think the show is so good. It's a great show for the barn. When we're done with the barn, and this is one of the things when actors were auditioning, when I was selling this show to them, I said, this show's going to get published, and your name's going to be in the script. And that's the faith that I have in it. I truly believe that, that this original cast is going to set this play in a new direction. It's a great family show. It's got great characters. It's got characters of all ages. It's got characters that people, our older audience, are going to just laugh and say, I've been there, I get it. But then we also are still trying to bring in that younger audience. And I think he does a really nice job of writing for that younger audience, of the technology and how, our Gen Z knows technology and our baby boomers don't. And so, he does a nice job of kind of not making fun of, but, finding the humor in both sides of that, how this one doesn't understand this generation and this one doesn't understand that one, but yet it takes both of them to make this world work. And I just think he does a nice job of telling that story.
Well, thank you, and I was sort of kidding. You can talk about the other 2, too.
Oh, I actually forgot we were doing the other 2. We were doing a Susan Parker script, Lone Star Love Potion. We've done a lot of Michael Parker. They were doing Michael Parker scripts before I took over. They're silly. They're fun. They're what we call the no-brainer. Don't overthink them. You just come in, you shut your mind off, and just enjoy the ride. I'm excited this year. Luke McLaughlin, who's kind of my right-hand man, we kind of say we do this together because we do. We're going to be on stage together this summer, and we haven't done that for several years. I think it was No Sex Please was the last time. And part of it, we said we weren't going to go on stage together is because we didn't want to do that to our fellow actors, because we pushed them pretty hard. But also, somebody's got to run the place. And when you think about it, when it was, Carol Ann, Marty, and Steven, if Marty was directing, Steven was the director or the technical director. He was building the sets and he was doing, running those elements. And that's kind of how Luke and I trade off. We try to form that same relationship because it's one of those things, if it's not broken, don't fix it. And it worked for them and it's still working today. So one day when I'm dead and gone and Luke's running, I don't know who he's going to find, but I hope he finds somebody as good as he is. But I'm excited to be on stage with him in that show, and it's very silly. The third show is our musical, which is Young Frankenstein, the Mel Brooks comedy. When I say it, everybody laughs, and they say that they're so excited about it. But remember, it's Mel Brooks. And we are in Clinton County, and I understand, there are limits to people's humor in here. And we always do our best to make it, it is a family place out there. So we tone it down as much as we possibly can, but I do say, it's PG-13. So, you're coming in, you expect what you're going to get, but I promise you that we are going to make it something that you're not going to walk out going, I can't believe they did that. That I hope you walk away and go, I wasn't sure, but it was okay in the end. Because we know that the audience is the most important people out there. I mean, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to do this. And we're doing it for you. We, on the first day, which we get so many college students that come in, on the opening meeting, I always say, we're entertainment art is what we're here to entertain people. We're not here to be super artsy, do things that only we understand, and if you don't get it, well, it's on you. We like to do things that's kind of we put in your lap and just say, just relax, entertain, it's the summer. Every now and then we slip in something that's a little artsy and somebody goes, I got that. And we're thankful for them for that. But for the person that just wants to come out and have a good time, that's what we're here for. Young Frankenstein, so if you don't know what it is, it's basically the parody of Frankenstein. It's the son of, the son, Frankenstein. So that he's embarrassed by his father because his father created this monster that, terrorized the town. And so now he is coming back in to basically, get rid of all that and then decides, wait, I think I can do it and I can do it right. And then, of course, it all falls apart and comedy ensues. So, but we have some really fantastic vocalists and performers that are coming in. The young man that's playing Victor Frankenstein, his voice is great. He's just finished playing Elvis in $1 Million Quartet down in Florida. I'm very excited to work with him.
Okay, audience, now it's your turn. But I have some simple instructions first. If you have a question for Michael, Jan, or Tom, don't just blurt it out. We have a thing to do. And there's Morgan. You just have to raise your hand. The reason being we need to get a microphone to you so that the people who are listening online will be able to hear your question first. So just raise your hand. Morgan will find you. Morgan's here, the director of our library, doing this for the first time without Mindy helping her, so it'll probably get messed up. Okay, ready? Any questions for anybody? Okay, show's over. Huh? Did you turn it on?
Is it muted? Is it light red or green?
Just once. Just a green light. Great. Okay.
Oh, Bethany.
I remember hearing about sometimes that there might have been weather because you're out in a barn. And were there any times that you had to declare the show must go on? Or were there any times like that when weather got the best of the barn?
I have a story. This is one I know there's a couple weather-related stories that took place at the barn, but my favorite was we were doing Guys and Dolls, and it was opening night, and there was this torrential rainstorm. Everything all over the central Indiana was closed down, so what are we going to do? We're all ready for opening night. We knew earlier in the afternoon we were going to cancel, and we had decided, well, maybe we'll just do a run-through, you know, and a car pulls into the parking lot, like water up to the top, and this family gets out. And they drove from Kokomo and apparently didn't have a radio in their car. I don't know, but so they came in and we're like, oh, well, we're going to do a show tonight. So that family of four sat right down center, and we ran the whole show. And to me, it's a lot of the times it's when things like that happen, those are the memories that last the longest.
We were doing Boeing, and the power went out. I think it was a transformer. I don't know if it was a weather-related thing or not, but the audience was there. And then the power went out. And then, of course, the emergency lights come on. And Marty and Steven just said, hey, we have emergency lights. Anybody that wants to stay and watch the show under the emergency lights, you are more than welcome. And anybody else, you can come back another night, and you know we'll get you in. And I don't think a single person left. But I will say those emergency lights only last so long. So as the show is going, they're gradually going out, and it's getting darker and darker. Steven had to run to Walmart to go get lanterns, and so they strategically set up. Linda Benj was in the show as well. She was the maid, and so she would strategically, whatever the word is, strategically come out with a lantern in her blocking and just set it here and then set one down here, and we were by candlelight. Basically, we kept the show going. Now move forward 20 some years. We did Boeing again last year. At intermission, we lost power. We actually had a little bit of an electrical fire. So the show had already been going, and I had to stop it because there was smoke. Now, there wasn't a fire, luckily. It was just smoke was filling. So we cleared all that out, but we couldn't turn the dimmers back on. But I said, hey, we have the work lights. Anybody that wants to go back in and watch the show, let's do it. And there was one couple, I think, that left, but everybody else was all in. I think this gentleman, right? Yeah, yes. He was there, and everybody went back in. We turned on the work lights, and I heard a couple people say, well, I can't tell the difference, which kind of hurt my heart a little bit. But we did it. So we kind of feel like maybe that show was cursed. So, in the next 20 years, whoever does that show, I say good luck to you. But
Any other questions? Don't be shy. Make up something. Yes, sir, that I don't even know. You got to have a couple plants in the audience.
Actually, I remember when that fire happened, because I got a text that said, the Red Barn's on fire. I was like, what? I've always wondered this. I'm curious of your guys' opinion, or anybody's opinion here. When I turn on the TV and I watch these movies and I watch these TV shows that are on now, and I watch the actors, particularly, close, and I'm like, I'm watching actors at the Red Barn that are way better than these people, in my opinion. And I don't know if maybe I'm just biased, maybe because I've acted on that stage. I don't know. But what do you all think from what you see on TV and what we see there live? And I always tell people, live theater, if you can do live theater, you can do anything. Because if you're on in front of a camera, you've got several takes. But live theater, whatever happens, is going to happen. So what are your guys' thoughts on people you've seen come through, or people you know are coming through, or even yourself? 'Cause I'm competitive person, I'm always thinking, I want to beat these people. And I'm always saying, I'm thinking, I'm with the Red Barn actors to beat these people.
You need to be more selective of what you're watching on TV. Sure, I mean, there's good stuff and bad stuff no matter where you look. But, for me as an actor, what it becomes really magic is when you lose the lines, where the lines come naturally as part of what you lose yourself in the character, if you will. Now, there's a technique there that you can't lose because you still have to know the blocking. You can't run off stage left and bang your head into the incoming set, which some of us did. But there's a certain magic that takes place when that evolves like that. And I mean, you can't debate that there's films out there that have that. I mean, look at everything that Scorsese's doing. I mean, come on. I mean, that's incredible stuff. So I mean, there's so much out there now with the internet media. There's so much you can choose from. I love live theater, so once you can get a connection there, I mean, go up to Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, see some stuff that they're doing. I mean, it's amazing when you see incredibly good theater. Not that the Barn certainly has its share of that, but you have to be critical about what you're watching and when you're watching it. I mean, to some degree.
Anybody else? Any questions? Yes, this ravishing-looking woman on the aisle, whom I don't know.
Yeah. You all were talking about the improvements. One of the things you might tell about is when it started out, there was no air conditioning. There were mosquitoes. There were hot nights because there was no air conditioning. Some of the improvements that we've done, if some of these people have never been to the Barn, maybe tell them how we're improving.
Well, there's always been AC since I've been there. I think it was just shortly before I got there, I just remember people saying, well, you're so lucky. And I'm like, yeah, I am. I look at pictures of the Barn at night, and it all lit up, and the windows open, and it's beautiful. If we tried to do that now, people would walk out. They'd say, it's too hot, I can't do it. I can't imagine. I mean, you guys went through it, of those hot nights and these, I'm trying to think of a show that takes place in the winter, where you're wearing winter coats and everyone is sweating.
God's favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky, but the visual of it is beautiful. The reality of it, I'm glad I wasn't there. Or, that I wasn't the one on stage sweating under those lights.
I think one of the hottest shows I ever did was Plaza Suite. And the gentleman who played across from me was a sweater. And it got really beastly warm. And Marty even said, keep water on stage, cover yourself. So we never missed a beat, but we were soaking wet some of the time.
You got a weather report every show before the show.
Every morning. Call.
Yeah.
It always did seem like, though, on the hottest week of the summer, we would do some show that puts you in winter clothes. It was, but we didn't know any better at the time, so. Well, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to wrap this up. On behalf of Hoosier Storytellers and our team, Mindy Weiler, Morgan, and the hardest working man in show business, Daniel up in the booth, I'd like to thank Jan, Tom, and Michael for joining us today. Remember, to find out more about the Red Barn or to purchase tickets, visit their website at www.redbarntheater.net. Hoosier Storytellers will return in July with a visit from some new inductees into the Frankfurt Hot Dogs Hall of Fame. Hoosier Storytellers is a presentation of the Frankfort Community Public Library.